Welcome back to another NRG Oncology podcast episode coming to you from the 2026 Winter Semi-Annual Meeting in San Francisco on our Protocol Operations Management Oversight Committee. Today, we bring you something of a bittersweet episode as we transition leadership of our Protocol Operations Management Committee, or as we call it, POM. Our wonderful friend and mentor, Dr. Maria Werner-Wasik, will be retiring and transitioning the chair of the POM committee to our current vice chair, and now soon to be POM chair, Dr. Alexandra Thomas.
Dr. Werner-Wasik has been a force of nature with the legacy RTOG group and then the NRG Oncology group for decades and has led multiple publications and committees within our organization. As a radiation oncologist at Thomas Jefferson, Dr. Werner-Wasik has served in numerous leadership roles, including residency program director, lung and brain cancer lead, and enterprise vice chair over the decades. Dr. Thomas has also had a prolific career as a breast cancer medical oncologist, having received millions of dollars in extramural funding for her translational research. She has been co-director of the Breast Cancer Center of Excellence program at Wake Forest and is currently associate director of translational research at Duke University. Dr. Thomas and Dr. Werner-Wasik, first off, I want to ask for people out there who aren't as familiar with the committee, what exactly is the Protocol Operations Management Committee, and what made the both of you decide to get involved with this group in the first place?
The POM committee, Protocol Operations Management, is actually a misnomer and discourages people from thinking about us. It should be just called accrual committee, which would represent its goal much better. To give a piece of history, in 2010, both NCI and ASCO held a joint symposium on cancer trial accrual, realizing that not all clinical trials accrue well. And then they wrote a statement in 2013 encouraging people to do accrual science, to investigate and publish barriers for clinical trial accrual. Why do we care about accrual? If we don't enroll fully into the proposed trial, that threatens progress in oncologic science. It wastes resources, in fact, millions of dollars. That's what it costs to run a clinical trial. And also, when we think about it, we encourage patients to go on studies and then the study closes prematurely to lack of accrual. I think that's actually unethical because the patients volunteered in good faith for a greater good, and then they will never hear about the result of the study. So the NCI mandated that NCTN groups create committees or have efforts to improve accrual. And that's how POM was born with the most recent edition of the NRG Oncology Grant Cycle. Why did I get interested? At that time in 2013, I stepped down as the RTOG publications chair and I was asked to lead this committee. So I just plunged in and the rest is history. I also asked to have a vice chair because it takes two people to lead a group efficiently. And wonderfully, Dr. Alex Thomas was assigned.
I think this really brings about an opportunity to highlight why Maria's vision and creativity, and as you said, Stephen, her being a force of nature has inspired so many of this. When you think about POM, you can take this in perhaps one of two directions. The more pedantic approach of we look at accrual and we roll our eyes at the trials that aren't occurring. Or you can take this different path and the approach that I would argue Maria has done, which is a broader approach of considering how we foster accrual across NRG trials. I would argue that this has made POM one of the most impactful committees in NRG and probably across the whole NCTN. When they approached me about joining POM, I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to have a broad impact in NRG-sponsored clinical trials and to pursue a commitment to excellence across NCTN clinical trials. Just as Maria has said, we want to steward our federal resources and our commitment to these patients with great respect and care. So that's why I would argue strongly that this committee has the greatest opportunity to honor these commitments. I also love working across cancer subtypes, even though my home is in breast. And then I would add, I knew in advance that the opportunity to work with and learn from Maria would alter the course of my career, and it certainly has.
I think Maria has altered the course of many careers, so we'll just throw that out there as major kudos to her. As we have the landscape of healthcare policy continuing to evolve, All aspects of our work are increasingly subject to scrutiny, and that certainly is applicable to the efforts of NRG Oncology. Unlike committees within NRG, like the disease site specific core committees that can point to specific clinical trials to justify their value, we don't run clinical trials directly through POM. For our listeners out there, whether it be the NRG Oncology stakeholders or the average American taxpayer, what is your best argument for the value of protocol operations management? In your mind, are there signature accomplishments of our group that you're most proud of? How do these accomplishments matter to our patients with cancer?
We thought that erasing barriers to accrual should start early. Yet the POM committee was not really charged with forming the design of clinical trials. That all happens in the protocol development. So we started thinking who or what is most important in owning the trial and increasing accrual. I always believed very strongly that any project, and the clinical trial is a project, needs to have a champion. And who is the best champion? Well, it's the principal investigator who wrote the trial and now is responsible for enrollment. And then I thought, do those principal investigators really know what they are doing? They designed the trial, but do they know the operations and the best mechanisms and best approaches how to influence the accrual in the positive direction? Without the champion who is really living and breathing the clinical trial they're running, nothing good will happen. Having read the Checklist Manifesto, a famous book about improving outcomes in surgery, I thought we should have a checklist of things each PI needs to check off while they are designing and running the study. And from that, something called the PI or Principal Investigator Toolkit was born. And this is essentially a checklist of actions, some of which need to be performed as mandatory by study PI, and others are done complementary by the NRG headquarters. Examples of those items may be preparing study overview slides, putting them on CTSU website, preparing a patient brochure so patients can understand in the lay language what the study is about, writing letters to the investigators in institutions, explaining to them in plain language what they want to accomplish, doing plenty of social media. And these days, nothing happens without social media, right? Having what we call a study landing page for patients on NRG website, monitoring accrual at least monthly, having phone calls and webinars, submitting abstracts about the proposed trial to the trials in progress at ASCO or ASTRO, doing patient videos and so forth. So there's the whole checklist. This was really embraced very enthusiastically by the organization, including help from protocol development with Nancy Soto. And for example, as of July 25, among 50 active studies, 36 utilized the full PI toolkit. And 41 had NRG monthly newsletter about the trial, 45 had a patient landing page, and so forth. One of our champions of the PI toolkit was and continues to be Dr. Christine Higgins, who utilized this toolkit in a pilot project in NRG Oncology LU005 trial for limited stage small cell lung cancer. That study accrued like gangbusters, although the study had a very attractive design with introducing immunotherapy. We believe that Dr. Higgins' involvement and engagement and videos and social media really contributed to this very fast enrollment. And she published a paper on behalf of the POM committee describing that process. We have many other accomplishments. We started realizing that how do we find patients for clinical trials? We have to screen them in institutions, and that process is completely unexplored, and there is no standard how institutions do that. So we ran a survey of institutions, and we'll be publishing on that. Before I go to the automatic data transfer and ask Dr. Thomas to comment, I just want to talk about the podcast. The podcast idea came from you, Stephen, and with Lauren being the co-PI, so to say, of podcast initiative, and it took as fire. We have so many podcasts now. It really described NRG oncology in wide spectrum, the whole story of clinical trials. So we are really feeling fantastic about it. Alex, I wonder if you can comment on the automatic data transfer initiative, which is ongoing.
The way I like to think about POM and how I would justify its role is if you think about a fancy sports car, our disease groups are really designing the car, but then you have to build it on an assembly line. And what we do is we make sure that the assembly line is running smooth and up to date. And what you've always pushed us to do is say, how can we make it better? Because we get handed the blueprint, and as it gets operationalized, we have to make sure it runs as smoothly as possible. And if you think about assembly lines in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they're very different than they are today. And what should it look like in 10 years? So that leads into one of the initiatives that I've been fortunate to lead, which is our partnership with Flatiron, now Paradigm, to use sophisticated technology to capture data from clinical trials. So historically, we had a data person who looked at the liver function test, took it from the electronic medical record or even from paper, and put it into a different data set for the clinical trial. As our technology has become more advanced, we should be able to seamlessly move those fixed data points and also get creative about moving other data points. I'd like to say that 10 years from now, we are not going to have data teams. We'll have to overcome some security issues, but we need to start doing this. It's not going to turn on like a light switch. So you've pushed us to be at the forefront in the NCTN of thinking about technology to enhance clinical trial operations.
Having described a lot of what we do and what we've done, I'm wondering if you could both talk about the resources that we have to accomplish these tasks. While many of our NRG oncology investigators are acutely aware of the limitations of our resources, I wanted to take the opportunity to convey what the disproportionate output is of this committee compared to our resources. This is certainly not specific to the Protocol Operations Management Committee. This is an issue that is experienced by all of the other committees and disease site groups at NRG. I wonder if you can just describe the degree to which we are doing this work as volunteers for this idea we can improve cancer care that we're not directly compensated for.
Yes, we are all enthusiastic people who want to do things better. I always feel that I'm an improver in heart. Whatever I can improve, I'll try to do so. How do we get rewarded? Well, if something works out and is improved, that's the reward. The improvement in accrual and hopefully having more studies being completed is for the benefit of our patients. But you also get the benefit of recognition. If you are in academic practice, being member of committees, being a leader of committees is something which contributes to academic career and is appreciated by your peers. We are making a difference. Should the NCTN groups and NCI and NIH have more resources? Well, of course. Should the budget increase from year to year? Of course. I hope this eventually will happen so we can get those bagels for breakfast provided by the group.
First of all, thank you for the thoughtful question. I think if you're, a practicing oncologist, I see how clinical trials have transformed our field and diminished the suffering from cancer. We as a community, those on POM committee, those active in NRG and active across the NCTN, have a shared passion around building a world with less suffering from cancer. And in our community, I would go even broader, our patients, our patient advocates, the people that fund us. Hopefully we can all be in alignment around that, even though there are limited resources, but it's because of that shared commitment that we really want to see that reward of better outcomes for our patients through clinical trials. That's the most important thing, but I would add in, it's also just our wonderful community to be a part of around this shared mission. And now for me, 25 plus years of being part of this community, it's really rewarding to build these friendships, professional collaborations. So that's a secondary reward. Most of all, it's for the patients. So if we can achieve that with a few bagels, we'll gladly do so. Maybe someday the bagels will be covered.
I really like the, just I think clear analogy of what we do is as being, as Maria put it, volunteer work, but obviously it builds our careers as well. I think a lot of young investigators or trainees view people in leadership positions in energy oncology as promotional type positions. And in some ways they are, because there's a huge mission that those people are leading and those roles are very important. But it also is just genuinely a volunteer network of united effort towards a common goal, as Alex put it, where even the bagels aren't free. So I think viewing it in that lens of volunteer effort is really important, and also casts a light on the efforts that we make in committees like that are, although Maria thrusts what we do into the spotlight and her creative endeavors and ideas like the podcast obviously shed light on POM. Much of what we do is out of the spotlight, pushing trials forward and propelling, those investigators to success, which is, I suppose, where the spotlight ultimately happens. For trials that aren't accruing so well and where they need that effort that we put in and POM behind them, the leading reason for failure of a clinical trial in oncology or otherwise is slow or poor accrual. Dr. Thomas, as the incoming chair of Protocol Operations Management, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing our committee today?
I'm going to, as a glasses half full person, turn this around a little bit and say, what opportunities might we have to enhance trial efficiency? I'm excited about what we can do with technology in the next decade. We talked a little bit about operational efficiency, data input, using technology to identify patients, having clinicians, when they're working, see something that says, that patient you're seeing next qualifies for a trial, or technology to find that patient with lung cancer with a very rare genomic driver who may be far from your site, but to identify them and bring them onto the study or let them know that it's available to them. So those are some of the operational ways in which technology might help us. But there may even be a next level for such things such as synthetic controls are now being considered. And can we consider those in the NCTN where the control arm of a study might not be attractive to patients? Can we use technology to help us generate meaningful controls? There are just so many opportunities to enhance our ability to test hypotheses and develop new treatments, but ultimately deliver that knowledge to our patients. I would make the case that POM under Maria's leadership is at the forefront across the NCTN, and we want to continue to be in that place. With regard to the trials that are under accruing, there often are individual things to look at. There may be an amendment going through, there may be a particular thing. You want to do a dissection in some ways.
So moving on to the next topic, Dr. Werner-Wasik, I've long been an admirer and an undeserving mentee of yours, along with Lauren. You were originally an internist, then a radiation oncologist, then a radiation oncology residency program director, now vice chair of a department and NRG leader. You seem very healthy and are still making a lot of contributions. What's been the secret to the longevity of your career? And secondly, why retire now when you are beloved and still making a lot of important contributions?
Thank you, Steve. What's the secret to longevity? I think it's being enthusiastic. I do consider myself an enthusiastic person about oncology, radiation oncology, medicine in general. I just never stop being impressed by new progress and by questions being asked. As I said, I'm an improver, so I like to improve things, and that helps in persisting. Persistence in academia, I think, is really a key to success. Never give up and keep at it, at your ideas, at your manuscripts, and your research, and so forth. Once you see a good idea, either your own or someone else's, support it wholeheartedly. If you support a good idea, only good things come out of it. How do you know what's a good idea? Well, it's sort of a gut feeling. You know when you see it. And why am I retiring when I'm beloved? Well, they say it is exactly the time point to retire when you are beloved, rather when some people think, well, she's staying along for too long or something. So, but seriously, I'm satisfied with accomplishments in my career. I want to do many other things, spend more time with my grandchildren, with my elderly mother. I want to travel and I want to hike in the Cornwall and in the Swiss Alps and attend more birding classes. So I'm finding time for that, at the same time being still involved on the national level in some Astro initiative and other initiatives. And I wish you all very well. You're just brilliant, and you're part of the brilliant new generation. When I listen to the younger investigators at Astro and other meetings, I'm just blown away how amazing they are and how they are moving our specialty forward. So it's time to step down and make room for the new ones.
I think we look forward to trying our best to carrying that charge forward and continuing your mission. Dr. Werner-Wasik and Dr. Thomas, thank you for being on the podcast. And obviously, of course, for everything that you've done through the POM committee. And Dr. Thomas, I think it goes without saying that Stephen and I stand ready to assist for anything you might need.
At the end, I want to just add that our committee would not be successful without an expert help of Christine Engel, who really supported us administratively and with slides and running the meetings. And I just want to say thank you, Christine. You are awesome, and we really love you and hope you will continue with the committee.
If I might just echo that, I could not agree more. Thank you for highlighting that, Maria.
Today, for the 2026 Winter NRG Oncology Semi-Annual Meeting, we've heard from Dr. Maria Werner-Wasik, the outgoing chair of the Protocol Operations Management Committee, along with her successor, Dr. Alexandra Thomas. If you like our podcast, you can follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Lauren and I also post updates on Twitter or X. Lauren's handle is at Lauren_Henke, and my handle is at Stephen Chun MD. The NRG Oncology Group is supported by funding from the National Cancer Institute, and content of this podcast does not necessarily reflect the official views of the National Institutes of Health. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and happy clinical trials.